Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of WrestleMania What Ifs, where we will be talking about WrestleMania 4 and how that show could have turned out very differently if they had maybe planned out the tournament a little bit better. But before I jump into all that, I want to give you all an update on what I've been up to and what's been going on with me and why there's been a delay in posting these videos. So my original plan was I was going to kind of knock these things out, film them in advance, and then kind of post them all throughout March and April, and, keep things rolling for WrestleMania season, and then birth of my child would happen, and then I could kind of take a break after that. Well, my daughter decided to come a little bit early. Actually, she was born the day, my wife went into labor like pretty much while they were singing happy birthday to me on the 20th, and then we ended up going to the hospital, and she was born at around 4 a.m. the next morning. So it was a wild, pretty turbulent thing. She was born prematurely, but thankfully everything's good health-wise. Everything looks good, and she's doing very, very well, despite the premature birth. So we're all good there. Unfortunately, because she came so early, it kind of threw a bunch of things out of whack. So I've just been playing catch-up for the last couple of weeks. And it's so funny. While I was gone, apparently something exploded at work, at my job. And I've spent the entire week just trying to clean up that whole mess that happened. So it's been a fun couple of weeks, I'll say that. But definitely keeping me on my toes. So if you're wondering where I've been and why there have been delays on the WrestleMania What If videos, that's what happened. And we're just kind of trying to adjust. I'm actually in a new workspace right now within my in-laws' house. So I can be closer to the baby in case anything happens. So again, we're trying to another new setup here while I'm adjusting and trying to figure everything out. So it's been pretty wild. I even got into a car accident the day my daughter was born. I was going back and forth between the house and the hospital, and I was going to go see my wife and my daughter at the hospital, and somebody rear-ended me right before I got to the hospital. So that was fun. Ended up speeding off before I could get any information out of him. One of those guys. So yay. But everything's looking good. Now, how this affects my video schedule probably means that the WrestleMania What If videos are probably going to continue after WrestleMania 41. I'd planned to get them all done before Mania 41, but it looks like with everything kind of slowing me down and all the scheduling changes, that they're probably going to continue for a little bit after WrestleMania. I don't think anybody will really mind, but that's just how it is, how it has to be for the time being. So, with all that said, like I said, today's video is going to be talking about WrestleMania 4 and how things could have been radically different if they had maybe planned out the tournament a little bit better. So, WrestleMania 4 is one that I'm kind of torn on because I love the setup of it. I love the Hogan-Andre rematch. With the dual referee angle and crowning of Ted DiBiase as the WWF champion after Andre surrendered the belt. I love that stuff. It's one of the best things the WWF/WWE ever did. One of my favorite angles of all time. And so that whole buildup is fantastic. In addition, you've got the great villain in Ted DiBiase. You have the big main event superstars from the year before, Hogan and Andre, who are still influencing events heading into this Mania. And you have Randy Savage being set up as the next big up-and-coming megastar while all of this is going on. So a lot of great stuff in the buildup to this WrestleMania. And I love the ending to this WrestleMania because Macho Man Randy Savage is my number one favorite wrestler all time. I love him. He embodies everything that I love about professional wrestling, the athleticism, the larger-than-life character, the promos, the colors, everything. I just love Macho Man Randy Savage. So that show was his big night in the spotlight, and he was the first man to ever win the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a major accomplishment and a major moment in WrestleMania's history. The show itself could have been better. Like, the tournament was unfortunately a little sloppy in its execution, a little confusing. I think having a 14-man tournament, and I get the logic of having Andre and Hogan get first-round buys, considering they were the ones that the controversy was centered around. They actually did a similar thing at Survivor Series 1998 with Undertaker and Kane getting first-round buys on the justification that they were the two that the controversy was originally centered around. So they were essentially the two top contenders. So it made sense for them to get that first-round buy. But there were a lot of things, like in the tournament, a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of people felt like maybe it should have been Savage and Steamboat in the second round, do a WrestleMania rematch where Savage goes over and further wears himself out before getting to Ted DiBiase. He has to encounter one of his greatest rivals and get his win back to make it to that finals situation. There were 2 buys because there were 2 draws. There was the time limit draw between Jake Roberts and Rick Rude, and there was the Hogan Andre draw, which resulted in Ted DiBiase getting a bye into the finals. So it was a little confusing for a lot of people, and I've heard Eric Bischoff talk about this. I think it was on the episode where him and Conrad reviewed Great American Bash 1992, which coincidentally was my very first WCW pay-per-view, which I ordered purely for the Sting Vader match, because I love the Sting Vader matches. But he mentioned in that episode the problem with one-night tournaments is that a lot of people go to see the big stars and they go to see the big attractions. So if you're there to see, like, let's say a Hulk Hogan or somebody like that, or, you know, if you're going to a basketball game, you're going to see Michael Jordan or something like that. And once you see them do their thing, they do the whole entrance, they play the game and, or, you know, wrestle the match or whatever. You saw what you wanted to see. So it's hard to kind of keep that same level of investment if that same person comes out 3 or 4 times. And I definitely understand what he's talking about. I think it's a legitimate criticism. I don't think it completely invalidates the idea of a one-night tournament, but that it is kind of a hurdle that you kind of have to jump over as far as executing these things. And I have seen the WWE execute one-night tournaments very well. The 2 best examples are King of the Ring 93, which, you know, to compare it to the WrestleMania 4 tournament, it was 8 people instead of 14. So 1 less round. I think 3 rounds is probably what you should shoot for a one-night tournament. 4 is probably a little bit too much. And so it was a lot easier to follow. And they did a really good job, showcasing Bret, having him go up against Mr. Perfect again, kind of referencing their history and their past, and giving Bam Bam Bigelow a bye to the finals due to the time limit draw between Tatanka and Lex Luger. And that match was very interesting at the time because both men were undefeated. So they did this tournament thing and they put the 2 undefeated people up against each other. So you're thinking, ooh, one of the undefeated streaks is going to come to an end. Very simple, but it ended up working out in the grander scheme of the tournament. And of course, it ended in a time limit draw, so neither undefeated streak got sacrificed in the tournament itself. But it ended up working very, very well. It was very well constructed all the way throughout. And I think having 3 rounds instead of 4 makes it a little bit easier to follow, and you're able to follow Bret's story throughout the night. Another excellent example of a one-night tournament was Survivor Series, Deadly Games, and that was because, and I'm going to give Russo the credit for this, but all of the story elements that went into Austin getting screwed, Rock making it all the way to the finals, Mankind making it all the way to the finals as the supposed chosen one for Vince McMahon, all of that stuff was really great. And it kept you on, you know, pins and needles the entire night before doing one last swerve, bro, with The Rock being revealed as the corporate champion and not Mankind. And, you know, everybody who was involved in that, you know, Austin now had a new enemy, Rock was now the champion, and Mankind was the most sympathetic person on the entire show. So he came out of it smelling like a rose, even though he was ultimately screwed over. So it was like everybody who was involved in that, like Big Boss Man got more heat on him because he was like, wow, he really is like Vince's like stooge and you know, his big muscle, because he was the one that helped eliminate Austin, and he also helped eliminating Austin by injuring him and weakening him for the second round. But he also was like put up there against Rock, and Rock beat him in like 4 seconds because he just rolled him up as well. Now you know why. He took a dive on Vince's orders. It's like, oh man. So many people came out of that like much better than they were going in. And that's saying a lot when it's like Austin, Rock, Mankind, and those guys. Vince, you hated him even more after that. Excellent, well done stuff. And that's a perfect example of a tournament done right by keeping the storyline, you know, fresh and exciting all the way throughout the night to where you want to see the finals. And I remember that tournament. I remember thinking it's like, okay, they're going to do the Attitude Era version of WrestleMania 4 where Austin gets eliminated, but he helps Rock win the title, and Rock is like the Randy Savage in that situation. But they, again, swerve, bro, and it all worked out beautifully, and it set up a great main event for WrestleMania 15 with a bunch of twists and turns along the way. But very, very, very good stuff. So those were probably the 2 best one-night tournaments that WWF ever did, WWE. And WrestleMania 4, not as good for the reasons that I've already outlined. It was a little sloppy, very confusing. The audience seemed confused by it because they didn't know who won what. I don't think they showed the brackets to the audience, so they were just confused to like who was facing who and what was going on. They popped for the finish because, again, Randy just won the title, which is fantastic. And they, incorporated Hogan and Andre greatly. And all of that was very good. So what I'm going to be doing with this WrestleMania What If is talking about how they could have handled the tournament differently to make it better while still getting the great ending that you want, which is ultimately Randy Savage winning the title by defeating Ted DiBiase. That's the main event you want, but the path to get there needs to be a little bit better and a little bit cleaner. And I came up with two solutions to do this. And I've kind of alluded to it already, but instead of a 14-man tournament, do an 8-man tournament. Hogan and Andre would not get the first round bye in this format, but it's still it's a lot easier to follow when it's fewer people. And, you look at the guys that were in the tournament. Did anybody honestly think that Dino Bravo or Don Morocco were going to win the tournament? It's I think you should kind of that's the other thing with one-night tournaments. And I've heard people criticize the Royal Rumble for the same thing, is that you can normally get the winner down on a good year where it's really unpredictable. If you can have 6 or 7 potential winners, that's a good year. That's a really interesting Rumble because you don't know who's going to win. But with tournaments like this, it's it's got to be either Hogan, Andre, DiBiase, or Savage. Those are the only ones. Those are the only ones that could potentially win it, and everybody else is just kind of superfluous. So the more people you have in it, the more pointless a lot of these matches become. So shorten it down to 8, and then who would those 8 participants be? Well, it's Hogan, Andre, obviously, have them face in the first round. You can do Savage and I was thinking Bad News Brown would make a great opponent. I was thinking Ricky Steamboat would make a great opponent. Any one of those two in the first round, and just give Savage a really tough challenge in the first round to really start his night off really harshly and give him a really tough opponent right off the bat. And then it would be DiBiase versus maybe DiBiase versus, I guess, Duggan, to keep Duggan in there. Duggan was a really over babyface, and basically do that match exactly as it was. And then do Jake versus Rick Rude, only instead of the time limit draw, have Rude cheat his way to victory so that Rude would face Savage in the second round. And then you can have Jake kind of get back at him and return the favor in the second round and help Savage advance to the finals or something like that. And I think, Rick Rude versus Randy Savage, that's a match I don't recall ever seeing. And that would have been a really interesting one to have, especially at a WrestleMania with the world title on the line. And then Hogan and Andre have their draw in the opening round. DiBiase beats Duggan, and then DiBiase goes straight to the finals. And then you do the Ted and Savage thing, where Savage has 2 really grueling matches to get to the finals, whereas DiBiase had 1 match where Andre helped him win, and then no match in the second round, and then he's practically fresh as a daisy come the time for the finals. So it's the same storyline. It's the same ideas that they were pushing at the WrestleMania 4 as it was executed, but a little bit simpler, a little bit easier to follow, and better potential for matches. Again, I like the idea of including Bad News Brown, even though, in doing this, he wouldn't be involved in the Battle Royal. And as for the other participants who were kind of being dropped from this thing, this show did have a Battle Royal. You can just stick them in the Battle Royal. It's fine. But it would cost Bad News Brown his big Mania victory, which was him winning the Battle Royal and getting the trophy, and Bret Hart smashing the trophy and everything. But Bad News Brown is a guy who I really felt like there was main event potential in him. And had he been younger, and had it not been the Hogan era where it's only select guys get the belt, he probably would have. There's a possibility he could have been the champion, because it's man, he was one of those guys that was Stone Cold Steve Austin before Stone Cold Steve Austin. Him and Dr. D were the two where I'm there was prototypes of Stone Cold Steve Austin that kind of because what made Bad News so interesting is that he was probably the only heel at the time that wasn't friends with other heels, which is why his matches at Survivor Series were so interesting, because he always stormed off and abandoned his partners. He's I don't have any friends, screw you people. And that made him a very interesting character. And he worked with Savage. They had a bunch of street fight matches with table bumps, which is something you never saw in WWF in '89. So it's I mean, you watch some of their matches from '89. It's like you feel like you're watching something from like a decade later. It's crazy. And he had matches with Hogan that were really good. They had a great match on Saturday Night's Main Event, and it was like, man, but I think he was in his 50s at this point. And it's like, man, if he had been a little younger, and maybe the creative situation had been a little different, there's a possibility that like Bad News Brown could have been the champion, because he's somebody I was always a fan of. I always found him very interesting. His finisher was cool too, the running enziguri called the Ghetto Blaster. Great name, great finish, loved it. So I just wanted to give my props to Bad News Brown. So yeah, opening round, it would be Hogan Andre, DiBiase Duggan, Jake and Rude, and then Savage versus either Steamboat or Bad News Brown, depending on which, because, a Savage Steamboat rematch would also be very exciting, even though it would be face versus face this time around, and they were kind of averse to doing face versus face stuff, but either one of those options do that, and then Rude versus Savage in the second round, and then Savage faces DiBiase in the finals. Bing, bang, boom, you're done. Now, the other solution that I came up with, and this is one that was kind of inspired by, of all things, Karate Kid Part 3, because in that movie, Daniel, as the defending champion in the All Valley Karate Tournament, they had restructured the rules to where the defending champion only has to wrestle or only has to fight in the finals. So Daniel only has to fight Mike Barnes. And I joked, as like, he retained his championship by only landing one blow in the entire tournament. And it's funny, they made reference to it in Cobra Kai, where Johnny was like, wait, they changed the rules so the champion only had to work one match? It's like, yep. And he's like, that's bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of bullshit. That sounds more like a heel thing. And that got, thinking about it, I was like, okay, well, if they wanted to do WrestleMania 4 right and do it in the best way possible, I was like, okay, let's say Jack Tunney decides that Ted DiBiase's WWF Championship run, when Andre surrendered the belt and gave it to DiBiase, let's say that is allowed to stand. And DiBiase is crowned the WWF champion, and he has to defend the belt at WrestleMania 4. Let's say, in this hypothetical situation, that Ted DiBiase that is forced to defend the title, but he uses his money and influence to kind of stack the deck in his favor, to where it's not that he's going to defend the title against a contender. It's like his contender will be decided the night of WrestleMania 4, and he will be there at the end waiting for whoever makes it to the end to face him. So I'm like, okay, so what would this situation look like? So what I decided here in option number 2 is a 4-man tournament. So whoever wins this thing would have to win 2 matches and then face DiBiase, winning a 3rd match, and DiBiase would only have to work 1 match the entire night. So that puts extra heat on DiBiase, that he's using his power and influence to kind of create this completely unfair situation where whoever's challenging him was going to be screwed in every which way possible. And it would be a perfect setup for him to take a big fall where Savage ultimately beats him. So in this scenario, it's a 4-man kind of mini tournament. Hogan versus Andre, we're keeping that match. And then Savage versus either Rick Rude, Ricky Steamboat, or Bad News Brown. One of those 3. It would probably, or maybe Honky Tonk Man. Maybe Honky Tonk Man would be a good solution here too, because him and Honky Tonk were rivals, and there was famously that whole situation where Honky didn't want to drop the IC belt to Savage at the main event, so they changed things around and put Savage in, going for the world title. So maybe they could have done like, as the Intercontinental Champion, Honky is one of the top contenders, so he gets into this. And so it really is the 4 top contenders going after DiBiase. And this is a way for Savage to beat Honky Tonk without winning the IC title and get his revenge on him. Because I thought, Honky was always considered like a lesser worker and more of an entertainer, more of a heat getter, but he's not going to give you like a Matt Classic. I thought his matches with Savage were terrific, and I thought they had amazing chemistry together. If you watch their stuff on Saturday Night's Main Event or the Main Event Special, which had the Hogan-Andre rematch, go watch that match. It's probably the best match that Honky Tonk ever had, were his matches with Savage. So do it again here at Mania 4. Savage goes over in this case, and then goes on to face an opponent in the second round. And this is where I kind of change Hogan-Andre a little bit, where instead of doing a draw, go back and watch the Hogan-Andre match for Mania 4. Hogan swings the chair first. So in my mind, even as a kid, I was like, I feel like Hogan should have gotten disqualified first. This shouldn't be a draw. I feel like Andre should have won by DQ. And they could do that here, have Andre win by disqualification, because let's be honest, Hogan's not doing a job. So let's just do this. So you do Hogan Andre with Andre winning by disqualification, and then Savage has to get by Andre the Giant in the second round. Now, when you do this match, I would imagine it wouldn't be very long. Andre at this point was suffering physically, and having him work more than once was probably a little too taxing for the Giant. But so my idea, if they went with this plan, I would be like, keep this match really, really short. Like really, really short, like under 3 minutes, if possible. And just have Andre toss Savage around like a rag doll. Just beat him pillar to post and just beat the absolute life out of him and just pound him and pound him and pound him. And then Savage gets like one lucky break where he's able to knock Andre out of the ring and then hit his flying double axe handle from the top rope all the way to the outside of the ring on the floor. Hits Andre, and maybe because it's Andre, he has to hit like 2 of them or 3 of them or something crazy like that. And he ends up winning by countout. And so it's kind of protects the Giant a little bit, not having him get pinned. But Savage is able to find a way to get past Andre the Giant. The toughest challenge in the path to get to the WWF Championship, but Andre does some damage to Savage and leaves him laying, and that sets up an injured Randy Savage heading into the finals against a completely fresh Ted DiBiase, and then you do the match as it is with Hogan helping Savage win, and you get Savage's big crowning moment. So it's, again, WrestleMania 4, same result either way. You get Savage walking out with the belt, the Mega Power celebrating, which sets the stage for the next WrestleMania, WrestleMania 5. Of the two solutions that I've cooked up here, I prefer the Ted goes in as champion because I love Ted DiBiase and I would love for him to have I was the defending WWF champion of WrestleMania on his resume. I think that would have been terrific and great for him. He was an outstanding heel, one of the greatest heels of his era or any era, and I would have loved to have seen that. But you also get Savage having to contend with Andre the Giant along the way, and it's a simpler format with only 4 people, 2 rounds, involved in this little mini tournament rather than the confusing and complex 14-man tournament that they cooked up. So really, WrestleMania 4 could have been a lot better and a lot more exciting. Well, holding it at Trump Plaza, and I don't mean to get political here, but Trump Plaza is probably the worst venue in WrestleMania history because it's loaded with kind of Trump's people who aren't really wrestling fans. So if you go back, especially WrestleMania 4, not so much at 5, but if you look at WrestleMania 4, the front rows are filled with Donald Trump's kind of people, kind of snooty businessmen and things like that, and kind of the elites, and not really wrestling fans, and not kind of the people you want watching a wrestling show, which I don't know if WWE's running into that problem with the ticket sales for WrestleMania 41 where they basically priced out regular people, but in any case, so that was definitely a problem. And also the venue just looked like a giant circus tent. And it's man, it looks so big and so great the year before at WrestleMania 3. And then you get this stupid circus tent looking thing. So it would have been nice if they had a better venue. I would have settled for MSG, quite honestly. Just go back to MSG. Why are we doing this? Or literally anywhere else. But whatever. And then the next year they go back to Trump Plaza and it still looks like a circus tent. And all the banners and everything are just the WrestleMania 4 banners. They just took the eye off of it. You can see the outline of the eye on the apron and things like that. I'm man, why are we doing this? It just looks so bad, but total sidebar. But you fix that, put it in a different venue with actual wrestling fans watching it, and then kind of simplify the tournament a little bit. I think WrestleMania 4 would have come off a lot better than it did. But that's the point of the whole WrestleMania what if. What could have been if the venue was different and the tournament was structured a little bit more, or a little bit less complex, easier to follow, and you still get the storyline payoff that you want out of it. So sometimes, I don't know, maybe wrestling companies and bookers overthink things, and this is probably an example where they would have been a lot better if they just simplified it and, But, at the end of the day, they got the result they wanted, and people popped for Randy Savage winning the title. I was happy. So, again, the ending was great. I just wish the path to get there was a little bit better. But that concludes this edition of WrestleMania What Ifs. Thank you all for watching. Again, I will be back next week with more of these and the upcoming Q&A, which I was going to get to last week, but again, baby born, so things happen. So, but that is all I have for you now. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new content, and I will be back next week with more, so be on the lookout for all of that.